welcome back. It is episode 102 of Out on That Line. I'm Jeff with my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
It's lit. I am all revved up with nowhere to go except deep into another podcast discussion on Out on That Line. I'm ready, baby. Let's do it.
Oh, yes. Are you ready? You're ready to spend your next 30 minutes talking about something very important to these people's lives?
These people better hold on to their butts because I sure do.
I think everybody is now at this point. We have an album to talk about this week that was given to us by a friend of the pod, Brandon. So thank you, Brandon. We're going to talk about The White Buffalo and his new album, Year of the Dark Horse. But before that, if you weren't aware, the temperatures have gotten a little colder. Those leaves have changed color and in a lot of places fallen down, which means the Out on That Line end of the year episode, the best and worst of 2022, is coming up soon. I believe, 2 weeks from when people hear this episode? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes. So we are going to run it back for the third annual best and worst episode in Out on That Line's history. How cool is that to say?
I got to be honest with you. It's cool to say. And the year-end review is my absolute favorite episode that we do. It's just so great to look back at all the great stuff and all the fucking crap that we had to listen to. And, just...
and I looked through all of our episodes, and there was a bit of crap.
There were more clunkers this year than I was anticipating.
Yes, but this is the end of the year episode is the chance to scrape that off the bottom of our shoes and move on fresh into 2023.
Absolutely. Scrub their memories. Get the little clicky thing from Men in Black.
Oh, I wish I had that for myself more than anything. But also, the opinions we really do want to hear is maybe what you thought was the best and worst of 2022. If there's something we hadn't covered or something we covered that you want to make sure we talk about again, you let us know. Whether it's a single song, an artist, an album, just anything. Doesn't have to be necessarily a straight music content release. If there was a concert DVD that you thought was really excellent that you want to give a shout out to this year, you let us know. You got 2 weeks to do it. Well, really one, because we're going to record before that. So 1 week from when you hear this to let us know what kind of things you might want us to talk about on that episode.
Yeah, I mean, it literally can be anything. If you had a super awkward encounter with a musician this year, I was at 7-Eleven and Noel Gallagher fucking tripped me into a rack of Doritos. And I
was wondering how bad that was going to get.
I'm like, careful now, don't offend Noel Gallagher. But yeah, I mean, anything that was significant to you about the year in music, just kind of drop something on us.
Yeah, let us know what you want. What you want us to talk about in those end of the year moments. Because after that point, after that episode, probably not going to hear from us for a couple of weeks. We're going to need our normal holiday break. Like you got in college, you got way too much time off. That's the kind of thing we like to do here at That Line.
Absolutely. We like to take advantage of the system because that's what the system is there for, to be taken advantage of.
Yes, the rules are meant to be broken. So I look forward to that. That is, I think, like you, that's my favorite episode to do every year. Unless there's some random banger of an album that we get. That's always the most fun one to do because we get to it's really fun to talk shit because we can talk about the worst albums ever. And that's what the category's for, is for us to talk some shit. So I look forward to that most of all.
Absolutely. It's perfectly balanced. The things we loved, the things we hated, you couldn't ask for more in a night's entertainment.
You could not. Well, what do you say we get into the album for this week?
Okay.
Coming to us from The White Buffalo, which is the band name, but it's really just the one guy, Jake Smith, and the album Year of the Dark Horse. So I want to first point out this cover is pretty cool. It's like an apocalyptic version of Petrichor. I forget what the artist's name was.
Heather Trost.
Yes, that one. How funny is it that I can remember that weird ass album name, but not the artist name?
Well, and it's totally apt too, because today I was driving to a haircut and I'm like, oh my God, Heather Trost. That's what this album cover reminds me of.
Weird. Life is not real. We are in a simulation that those two things can happen.
Life is a bit.
Yes. So I was familiar with the White Buffalo ever since I heard Modern Times. And I think I saw the video. It got posted on Twitter or something like that. And I was like, oh, this guy's a fucking weirdo, but loved it. And so I went and got the album Love and the Death of Damnation. And that is a fantastic album. There are so many good songs on there. one thing that I want to point out about Jake Smith, and it's a term that you said on the show about Corey Taylor of Slipknot when we did the Metal Monday episode, and you said his voice was thick. And that is all I can think about when I listen to the White Buffalo, because he's got, I don't know what register it is. Is it baritone or bass?
He's baritone.
Baritone. It's just like so full and deep, and just like the way he can growl with it, and he can like kind of climb up a little bit. I wouldn't consider him a falsetto singer by any means at any point, but he's got a good range, for being in that lower range. And I've always enjoyed that Love and the Death of Damnation album. I think I like this one even more.
And I really have a non-existent basis in the White Buffalo. I know the song Modern Times, when that came out, I remember you were kind of sending that around to like me and Tanner. So I remember that, and then I remember a bunch of his stuff being used in Sons of Anarchy, which,
yes,
like, speaking as a guy who's watched that entire series, it's a douchebag show. It's a douchebag show. Yeah. So like, I kept hearing him on the show, and I'm like, that tells me all I need to know. I was like not super enthused about the White Buffalo. So I had reservations going into this. He just like didn't make a ton of sense to me. And not like, oh, this is so cerebral. I was just like, it's the cilantro thing.
Yeah.
The enzymes can't put it together for him. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this guy. So knowing that this came from Brandon, I wish we could have tagged him in as a guest, because he could have quit this way better than I can. And he could, like I'm hoping you will on this episode, help me understand. Because I'll just say up front, I didn't like this.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to call it bad. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. I just didn't like it, but I want to understand why, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think because he does get weird, like his lyrics, like there's certainly some lyrics, and I'm not going to read the certain ones that I'm thinking of, because this is a family show, and I'm just not going to read that certain passage. And I'm sure if you go back through and listen, if you haven't thought of what I'm talking about yet, if you go back and read through the lyrics,
what it is.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll pick out which one it is. But I really liked, Brandon had first suggested when Not Today came out as the first single, which is the first song on the album. He sent it over to me. He was like, hey, check this out. And it was unlike anything I'd heard the White Buffalo do before. Because before, like, I had kind of considered him like a country artist, like a Roots or Americana, that kind of vein of Sturgill and Tyler Childers and that kind of stuff I'm normally into. Maybe a little more towards like the more like rock and roll side of that, I guess. But he had a lot of songs that had a lot of mandolin, a lot of banjo, and just that kind of like fast paced, almost Western sort of style to it. So I was not expecting a lot of this album. I think this played much more like a musical, more than it played like a previous album that he'd had before. So for that reason, I thought this was going to appeal to you. For that reason, I thought you'd like the other stuff less than you like this, just because it had different movements. It almost reminded me of, I don't know what was the guy's name? I think your friend Orion like suggested it to us.
Ben Kaplan.
Yes. That has that like really big, deep, powerful voice. Like, I felt like this had that same sort of vibe to it, where it was just that almost like a Sweeney Todd sort of feeling at certain points. So I thought for that reason it might appeal to you. But I do think there was enough of his older, like kind of country leaning stuff that if you were a fan of what he did before, you could find a lot to like in this album. But I think I would have considered, if somebody was like a really big White Buffalo fan, that this album might not do it for them. It did it for me because I really only am familiar with that one other album by him and maybe like a handful of other songs from other albums. But this one was way different than what I was used to. This gave me like almost Pink Floyd vibes sometimes. It very much ranged in the influences and styles and things like that he was bringing in to use for it.
Well, and I was in a totally different position because the only thing I had to compare it to was Modern Times and vague, extremely vague moments in Sons of Anarchy. So I was pretty much a blank slate because Modern Times is very much, to me anyway, in line with the stuff on this album. So I went into it and it wasn't a different White Buffalo for me. It was really like the first intensive White Buffalo dive that I took. And I think while you were talking about all of that, to address the first thing, it was appealing. I looked when I was like reading into it, and it's like, this is basically like a song cycle or a small musical that takes place in a year of a guy's life. 12 songs, just boop through the seasons. Better than what fucking Weezer's trying to do with their little seasons tetralogy. Suck my butt. But I was like, okay, yeah, the concept is very cool. And I think the concept is interesting, and the things that get talked about are interesting more so than the execution in a lot of places. And I think talking about it, I've identified what my problem is. To give him a compliment sandwich, his voice is awesome. He has a really cool, unique voice, and he doesn't try to do something that he can't do. So there's no hat on a hat with his voice. He's like, this is what I do. This is my set of tricks. This is what I got. Perfect use of that. The music, to me, is super repetitive and not extremely engrossing to me. It's a lot of the same, like chung tung 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 tung, like a lot of the same patterns were appearing to me, and like a lot of things kind of like felt too similar to other stuff. But what stood out was the more like Leonard Cohen-y stuff that he did. So here's the other last piece of bread in the compliment sandwich. The Leonard Cohen type stuff that he did, when he like really kind of leaned into that and like got into like descriptive imagery and stuff like that, it worked really well. So there's just that piece for me, unfortunately, is just the music itself.
And I think because his voice is so deep, it's like hard to put your standard like kind of pop harmonies and melodies and stuff like that in the background, behind his voice. Like it doesn't work like that. The best pop singers are usually like tenors and altos and sopranos, just because it's a much more like kind of piercing sound to cut through the mix of everything. I think because he's got such a low register, the music has to stay a little more muted for his voice to be able to shine, enough that you can kind of hear what he's saying and how he's trying to present these things emotionally and so on and so forth. I think on like the first song, I think that's probably the most interesting, maybe musically, just the way it kind of builds. It's definitely, I think when you watch that one with the video too, it gives you like very Lebowski vibes. And I think when I look at him like that, it's like a more serious version of Lebowski is kind of how I view the White Buffalo. I also felt like I watched Sons of Anarchy too. I felt like the music in Sons of Anarchy was the only good part about that show, because they had people like Scott H. Byram. I think they had John Prine songs playing on there a bunch of times. So to me, I was like, oh, they always have good music. Like the past season 3 sucks, but at least the music's good. But I can see where if you're not like familiar with hearing him anyway, that you would associate his music with This Show Feels Bad.
Yeah. This show is a bad.
Yeah.
And I truly, the inclusion in Sons of Anarchy is more of a bit than it is anything. It's not something I would hold against any artist that was on there, good or bad. But yeah, I take the point that he like has to play to his strengths, and it doesn't lend itself to traditional pop or really country. This is kind of by design not organized around a genre. And I do like that. I really do. So if you're like, I think I probably would have liked even less some of the more like rootsy country leaning stuff, because in this, there were just like some moments where I was like, this is going to be interesting. And then it like never quite took off. And I think it was probably because I was like in my head expecting more out of his range or out of his performance. So it's clear to me he has like a fairly limited range that he knows how to do a lot of stuff within. So again, play to the strengths. But I think I almost kind of would have liked it more if he was getting like super emotionally unhinged in his delivery. Like when you hear Ben Kaplan do a song like Plow the Shit,
yeah,
just the way he puts his whole body into, or the way Tom Waits puts his whole body into a song, I know that's kind of like ostensibly what the White Buffalo is doing or trying to do. But to me, I'm like, I just don't, there's kind of an ironic distance between like the performance and what he's singing about. Not always, not in all places, but for the most part. And it like kind of kept me at a distance as a result. It was a very like weird thing. Like sad more than like angry, butthurt, or like disappointed or anything. I'm like, just this
See,
weird
this is
detachment.
honestly one of the most surprising, because I listened to this album. I was like, oh, I feel like this is right up Alex's alley. It's like it's on the weird side. It's like a guy that's got, it's a musical kind of structure and sensibility to it. I was like, this might be right up his alley.
And that's the thing. Again, when I went into it, I had that impression where I'm like, hey, I'm going to be like super duper open minded to this. It's something new.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a cool concept. And then to me, it was like, it ended up being pretty scattershot in the concept. And it's not like I needed a super linear storyline is the only way to understand it. But it just like there were weird juxtapositions and then like songs that were stronger, like much stronger than others. So it kind of like wasn't as coherent to me and didn't have as much of a like unity to me at all times. And like, that's fine. That's fine. But when I have this other underlying issue where like I need the music to be really like striking and interesting to me, this just isn't for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about it being put together for me, but like that's that. And I think this thing I talked about with like the ironic distance between himself and his subject matter, that's the impression I get. I don't want to besmirch the guy. It's just how it comes across to me.
Well, I think this could very well be a situation like the Springsteen album. I enjoyed it for the fact that it was Springsteen doing something I wasn't used to him doing, but I was always going into it as a Springsteen like diehard, and I think you coming at it as more of a, and I think you do like Springsteen a lot, but not to the extent that like I was raised by my dad to worship him, basically.
Right.
So we're coming at that at different angles. You're looking at that a lot more objectively, and I'm looking at that very subjectively, and I think that's probably what's going on here too, is that I for some reason, I guess I thought you would listen to a lot more of the White Buffalo than this. So it's actually, I mean, it's interesting that maybe this isn't the best entry point for people. So like if you maybe have listened to this and you liked a couple of songs, but overall you weren't a big fan of it, maybe go back to one of the older albums and see if there's something else that you like, because this is different than what I was used to hearing from him. And I think I was going into it very subjectively, probably just like Brandon did. We love the guy anyway, so we're just excited to have new content by it. And I feel like it's always interesting that can be really the deciding factor. It's like you're going to love, a favorite artist of yours and kind of whatever they do, I guess up to a certain point. Obviously there's a line of demarcation where it's going to be bad. But somebody that was maybe a casual fan or didn't really listen to that artist at all, trying to come in on that same thing that you really like, may not be the right thing for them to come in on, and I think this might kind of represent that situation pretty well here.
That, and I'm just a hipster piece of shit.
Well, no one ever accused either of us of being anything different, so.
But that's the thing is, again, I'm not going to be, this was bad. This is just, I didn't connect with it. It didn't connect with me. And that sucks, because I know that if you dig it and if Brandon digs it, that there's a hint of merit to that. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take this really seriously and like check this out. And it just like, it whiffed for me. It whiffed for me as hard as Benjamin Todd hit for me, like the kind of songwriting there and like how open and raw and like emotional that is. Like that's the kind of shit in this genre that grabs me. And to give the White Buffalo his flowers, because there are flowers to be given all throughout the album. It was this weird phenomenon where in something like Kingdom for a Fool, it was very Neil Young Out on the Weekend.
Yes.
And this whole idea of like that Thoreau quote, living lives of quiet desperation, like that was well executed. Yeah. So I guess it sounds like you got something to say about that. I'm not going to just.
Kingdom for a Fool was one of the songs that I listened to that, when I was first getting through the album, and you obviously get into that pretty quickly on the album, because it's like what the third song. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you get to that one pretty quickly, but that I liked Not Today, but I had listened to it before because it was released as a single. Winter Act 2 was pretty good. It was that felt almost like a little like a just kind of a bridge piece really to get into Kingdom for a
Yeah.
Fool. And there was a song, Radio with No Sound, that he did on Love and the Death of Damnation that was like a really kind of slow song that I really, really love that song. And Kingdom for a Fool was that same, gave me that really kind of lo-fi version of the White Buffalo where he just lets his voice sit down in that really low kind of register. And you really forces you to like, it's basically like saying, come closer, I have to tell you something, you know? And so you have to start paying attention to it. And I think his voice being that way for me, that's what makes it so engaging, is because when he decides to just like drop it and just basically, you know, kind of talk melodically more than he is singing in some of these songs, it just, that particular sound really appeals to me. The way that the lyrics went, you know, it's very simple. Like, these are not lyrics that, I'm not trying to put him on a pedestal for Songwriter Hall of Fame here, but the way he's able to deliver things, it just gives it a little more gravity when I listen to it.
This is a perfect time to transition into what do we think the super dirty line Jeff wouldn't talk about was?
Wow, do you have a guess?
Was it and She Don't Know That I Lie, where he's talking about finishing on her perfect behind?
That's the one.
Was I close?
Yeah. Nailed it.
Leave it to the Frank Zappa fan to sniff out the
Yeah,
absolute
right?
most
Yeah,
deplorable
that's
thing.
some Frank Zappa stuff there. I was like, when I heard that line, I was like, damn, White Buffalo? I never heard something like that before.
Yeah, that was certainly unexpected. It does kind of just he's being kind of coy about it on the rest of the song, like aggressive but coy, and then all of a sudden it's just like, I'm not finished on her perfect behind. You're
Right
like,
after he
oh.
said he looked at himself in the mirror. He like, I caught my gaze in the mirror.
Yeah.
And that could have been that. So that song, She Don't Know That I Lie, that was one of the down points on the album for me. There wasn't a lot of
Sure.
points where I was like, yeah, I probably don't need to listen to this one again. That one, and not just because of that line. I mean, it just, I don't know why. Cause like if I read through these lyrics, like this should be something that I like a lot. The way that it's a storyline, it's linear and everything. It just, I don't know, the way he delivered it, the way the music was in this one, it just didn't jive for me on that song.
Certainly. And this is another example of like, I think the person, this is like such a fucking shitty, snotty thing. I'm a 33-year-old man and I'm going to say this to like a 50-year-old dude. But I think the person that the White Buffalo has the most to learn from is Tom Waits, 100%. Like, he touches on some Neil Young stuff, but then it's so like on the nose, recognizably Neil Young, that it stops being a cool thing that he did. And you're like, well, you kind of just ripped off Out on the Weekend. He does it with Mr. Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Where he just rips the whole, like the effect and the piano and all that, like right off. And you're like, well, now it's recognizably ELO instead of like you doing something cool in that vein. And like, that was a problem for me. But anytime he settled into something kind of like you said, like resting low in his voice, Tom Waits, spooky, pseudo talky, weird stuff. That's the stuff I'm like, you could walk further in this direction.
Yeah.
And I would come see that.
Yeah, and he's got a few of those kind of songs on Love and the Death of Damnation. You know, it's definitely a varied album. It definitely leans more towards like that kind of roots Americana style. But that, man, She Don't Know That I Lie, that was just, I did not like that. Did not like that song one bit.
Not like that, Buffalo.
Yeah, like, but Kingdom for a Fool, the song Come On, Come Up, Come Out. Yeah, nailed it. That one for me was, it was definitely like a more upbeat kind of song, because he can, if you want to give him some like kind of dance music to sing, like he'll do his best with it, you know, and you can tell. I think that's part of the reason too, is like, I think he knows there's some of his songs that like he tries to sing and it's like really just not going to work for him in his register. He can sing loud, he can't sing high. And I think when he tries to sing high, that's when things go a little south. So I think when you look at Come On, Come Up, Come Out as him just like, this is kind of a break in the album, after you get songs like She Don't Know That I Lie, Kingdom for a Fool, like there's kind of some downers there. And definitely after Come On, Come Up, Come Out. But like Heart Attack is a pretty big downer. Basically, kind of you go from like track 8 and down to the rest of the album. It's all kind of like that's
it's a big downer.
Yeah, like there's enough on here that I really really enjoyed it. But I think Come On, Come Up, Come Out was where I really heard that like kind of Pink Floyd sort of influence. Like you got a little weird, some like Flaming Lips kind of stuff. It just was interesting. And I think if he kind of sticks with that side of things, maybe he can go a little psychedelic. I think that'd be kind of interesting to hear his like telling a space age opera or something in his style voice. I think it'd be pretty cool. But overall, I really did like the whole album. I probably won't go back and listen to the second half of it like back to back, but the songs like Kingdom for a Fool, Not Today, Love Will Never Come, spring song, I thought was really strong as well. Those are the ones that I'm going to go back to over and over. And when I think about Love and the Death of Damnation, the reason I said I think I like this album more is because there's really only a couple of songs on Love and the Death of Damnation. I think there's more on this one that I really want to go back to. Overall, as like a whole like album listening experience, it was good. I think this was something that I'll probably go back on like a road trip or something, and I just need something to listen to. This one's easy. And I think I'll go to it for that reason. I don't know if I've ever gone to the White Buffalo for any sort of deep emotional connection or deep meaning. It's just a little bit different than some of the other stuff I listen to. So I've always enjoyed it. But I'm going to say overall, stream it on this one, especially if you've liked his previous stuff. I think you will like a lot of stuff on this album. If you haven't listened to him before this and you want to try to get into him, I'm going to say pick either, what was it called? How the West Was Won or Love and the Death of Damnation, or one of those ones in like the 2010 to 2017 period. I think he's got a lot more kind of broad appeal on those albums than he does here. But if you're already a White Buffalo fan, I think you're going to like this one.
Well, Jeff, I'm also going to say stream it because I think people need to make up their minds about this for themselves. That's me giving myself a lot of credit, being like, oh, what I say goes with these dum-dums. But if I'm trying to if someone asks for my opinion, which is in theory the end of this episode, right? Every time.
Mm-hmm.
My barriers to it are a lot of quirks that you probably will not have. It's just a perfect storm of quirks for me. Like this idea that he is performing this material. He's not doing it. Like, again, to use Tom Waits, I think performing it is thinking about it while you're doing it. Doing it is Tom Waits just goes into a booth and vomits up a spooky skeleton song. And it's the scariest, weirdest shit you've ever heard. And I think that for me, I'm I just want to see the music overtake the White Buffalo. And he just has a full-on exorcist moment. I think that would be very cool because he's got the voice for it. And I think he's got the instincts for it songwriting wise. And it just kind of developing that narrative in my head and it not happening. It's all quirks on my part. You probably will not have these quirks, so you should listen to it for yourself.
Yeah. And I think I agree with you. He just overall, whether however strong both of our streamits are individually, I think we fully agree on he just needs to let it rip. Just let it rip and see what happens. Do the weirdest shit you can think of and just see what happens. Because I think his voice is so unique. There's really I can't think of anybody else that sounds like him, really. And I think if he just grabs hold of that and just gets as weird as he fucking can with it, I think he might have some gold. And it's worth a shot at this point.
It's worth a shot. And Buffalo, may I call you Buffalo? If you're listening, no hard feelings, buddy. It's just constructive criticism. We'll get some poke sometime.
I think we just call him Buffy.
Buffy?
Yeah.
I love that. Friend of the show, Buffy.
Well, we crossed another threshold on the old YouTube, Alex. We crossed 1,200 subscribers.
Oh my God, we did.
We did. That's strong.
That's fast. Unexpectedly fast and strong.
Yes. That's what she said.
Hi-oh, Michael.
But what I'm getting at here is that if you aren't already subscribed on the YouTube, that's kind of where all the action's happening. So if you're not already listening there, you can. You can get this podcast episode. You can get so many reaction videos at this point. You can get so many singles videos. Alex just put up a solo review of the new Taylor Swift album. So if you want to find out how much he loved that one, and he did, I promise you, go check it out. You go to that YouTube, and Alex, can you tell him where that is?
Well, Jeff, there's only one wintry wonderland where you can find Out on That Line and all of our fine products, hits, and features and specials. And that is on the official YouTube, where you will subscribe, you will leave comments, you will turn on notifications, you will submit to Out on That Line on youtube.com/C/Out on That Line.
Oh, that was absolutely wonderful. Let us know what you want to hear, folks. Again, that end of the year episode is coming down the pipe fast. You have 1 week. The clock starts now. Until next time.